Controversy heats up on Capitol Hill as the president snubs one of America's closest allies and loses control of Congress in the process. House Speaker John Boehner defies the president and takes his own initiative. Boehner invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to speak in front of Congress.
That's why I've invited Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to address a joint session of Congress on the grave threats of radical Islam and the threat that Iran poses to not only the Middle East, but frankly to the world. America and Israel have always stood together. We have a shared cause, we have common ideals, and now we must rise to that moment once again.
But now that Boehner has taken a strong stance against the president, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tells the press Boehner is out of line and that he needs to stick to the script.
Our president has a plan. It has so far taken us down a path that has frozen the capability in Iran thus far. It may or may not succeed. But we cannot have it fail because Congress wants to flex its muscle unnecessarily.
Not exactly a ringing endorsement for the president's foreign policy. Pelosi says the president's plan could fail, but that Boehner is the one reaching too far. There's sure to be more drama unfolding in the near future, even though his predecessor says he's out of line. Boehner says that he didn't do anything wrong.
I did not consult with the White House. The Congress can make this decision on its own. I don't believe I'm poking anyone in the eye. There is a serious threat that exists in the world.
President Obama says that he will not be meeting with Netanyahu when he arrives, but the White House insists that it is not a snub. Rather, Obama says it is White House protocol not to meet with other heads of state in the days just leading up to their election. Netanyahu is up for re-election just a few weeks after he is set to arrive in Congress. And so far as we know, no members of the American Congress will be voting in the Israeli elections. During Tuesday night's State of the Union, President Obama told the nation that America's military combat mission is completely over in Iraq. Now, less than 1 week later, the U.S. military is preparing to take Mosul again. The Wall Street Journal reports that the U.S. and Iraq have begun preparations for an assault by this summer to recapture Mosul, the second largest city in Iraq, second only to Baghdad. Right now, the process of selecting and training the right troops is underway, and in the meantime, they are busy cutting supply lines to the Islamic State extremists who now control Mosul, after rolling through that part of the country already taken by U.S. Marines a decade ago. In the run-up to the next election, the head of the U.S. Central Command at the Pentagon says they are causing significant damage against ISIS, reclaiming about 300 square miles in Iraq and killing some 6,000 members of the group. But just before this new offensive, apparent friction between the United States and Iraq, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel met the media to address the recent complaints from Iraq's president that the U.S. isn't doing enough to help stop the Islamic State.
I do disagree with the Prime Minister's comments. I would say even further, I don't think they're helpful. And I think the Prime Minister might want to be a little more mindful of that. We are continuing to deploy more American troops for training. And we have 3 of 4 training sites now operational in Iraq.
While leaders in Washington and Baghdad bicker over the amount of military action, the president still maintains that the American military combat mission in Iraq is over. Well, guns and airports don't mix well, especially if you're trying to catch a last-minute flight. But the government says that a record number of guns are being discovered in people's luggage. The TSA reporting a record 2,212 firearms were found in carry-on bags at airports last year, and most of them were loaded. That breaks down to an average of 6 guns a day, either in people's bags or on their bodies. That number is up 22% from the year before. The USA Today reports that the #1 excuse given by travelers with guns to the TSA, they forgot that they were carrying them. Out on the West Coast, a growing fear of measles spreads to 6 different states, and federal health officials say that it all started out at Disneyland. Measles is no doubt one of the most painful and most contagious diseases that is commonly prevented by vaccines. National health officials insist out of all of their recommended vaccines, the measles shot is the most effective and the most safe. Now that at least 70 people have come down with measles in 6 different states over the last month, pediatrician Dennis Wu from UCLA hopes that parents will start taking another look at their health choices.
The good thing with this is that it reminds people that these illnesses still do exist and that it will open up discussions. I think that a lot of times the decision not to immunize is not based on facts but on feeling.
Public health officials in Orange County have told all parents who don't vaccinate their children not to come to school, especially if there is a confirmed case of the measles at that school.
If there is an outbreak in your school and you are not protected, you will be excluded from school for 21 days.
The hardline stance of banning children from school is drawing a lot of criticism from the anti-vaccine crowd. Dr. Wu also gave out some other precautions for those parents who still opt not to give their children the MMR shot.
You stay away from crowds. If you do travel, you try to stay away from people, and you can protect your child to a certain extent, realizing that anytime you go anywhere, there's a certain risk of exposure.
The Congo is in chaos as protests continue over recent government decisions. Congo government officials are working towards changing upcoming election laws. The proposed legislation will allow the current president, Joseph Kabila, to continue his reign over the country.
The only solution here is for the government to embrace democracy. Our leaders must understand this is not the time for war, and they should let people go to the polls and choose who should govern them. This is not war. We want new leaders and we want to elect them.
Clashes between security forces and protesters are reportedly the reason for over 42 deaths. Riots have caused much damage to infrastructure in the capital city of Kinshasa. President Kabila has been in power for 14 years, and his government denies any allegations of delaying the elections. A heated argument brews between Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo and Fox News. The mayor is suing the news station after she felt the image of the city was prejudiced. An inaccurate map was displayed with so-called no-go zones on one show. On another segment, an alleged security expert said that Birmingham, England, is a totally Muslim city where non-Muslims don't go in. Hidalgo calls these slips an insult and that the honor of the city has been prejudiced. Fox News says that although they empathize with French citizens, the lawsuit is misplaced. French courts have little to no leverage with the company since Fox has limited presence there. If France pursues in a U.S. court, it would not hold up due to freedom of government criticizing. Media outlets are also protected from foreign courts by U.S. law. If the case makes it to court, it would prove difficult for Hidalgo to make any strides against Fox News. Uber continues their service in New Delhi amid global controversy. After an Uber driver was charged with alleged rape last year, India's capital banned all forms of drive sharing. The arrest triggered massive protests regarding the safety of women in New Delhi. Now Uber is starting its services in the capital again, but government officials say it isn't legal. A senior transport official for the city says they can't start operations. They don't have a license yet. They have only applied for it. It may get cleared. We would request changes or we may reject it. India isn't the only country that has had problems with Uber. France, Spain, Thailand, and others have all placed some type of ban on the company. Many of these countries are seeking out stricter safety regulations for Uber drivers.